This summer, give your child.
Welcome to Drivetime Exchange. As rubber hits the road, hard talk meets great music. Monday to Thursday, 4 to 6 p.m. on Net Radio, taking you above and beyond.
Parents of our nation have got an obligation, that's to take proper care of their child. Soon they will be men and women, soon you will be old and bent. Teach them the correct way, don't let it run wild. Children must learn from the time that they're young the difference between right and wrong. Not knowing better, they're bound to get burned. So make sure your children learn.
All right, everybody, and of course, this is where we invite you inside of the Drive Time Exchange right here on New Era TT Radio, the heartbeat of the Caribbean, as we take you above and beyond. So pleased to be here with you in your company this afternoon, and of course, we have great programming straight ahead for you. Of course, this is our Drive Time Exchange with our journalist extraordinaire, Mr. Tony Fraser. Tony, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you, Charles. How is life going?
It's going.
A big question, man.
Yes.
Big question.
Yes, it's just going. That's all right. How are you doing?
Not too bad at all. Keep trying to keep up with young fellas like yourself. So trying my best.
And I'm trying to keep up with those younger than me. So I guess it's a cycle.
Wonderful. So what we are attempting to talk about now is something of a cycle, actually. The violence that we see perpetrated in schools, a circle, a cycle, a whole series of events that are taking place. They appear on video everywhere, on Facebook, etc., etc. And we are attempting to get the people who are involved to talk about how do we get out of this difficult situation that we're in. And sometimes we think it's been going for 5-10 years. It hasn't. It's been going for 30 years plus, increasing all the time, of course, and difficulties all around. So what we've done is to attempt to assemble a group of people. We have two of them. Two others dropped out at the last moment. Hopefully we'll get them at some point in time. But very importantly, we have Mr. Martin Lum Kim, who is the president of TUTA, that's the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association. Welcome to the program, sir.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for having us on your program, Mr. Fraser. It is an honor and a privilege to be interviewed by you.
Yeah, it's and of course you and your teachers are at the heart of the situation, meaning that you get all of the difficulties that the whole of society heap on teachers and schools and so on. And you know, it has become popular to think about the schools as being the problem, but the schools aren't the problem. The problems are with the children, right? The students and their parents and so on, and how they've been brought up or not brought up. Some people talk about being dragged up and so on. I'm not saying so. I'm just saying that that is a comment that has been made. We also have with us Mr. Zaheer Ali. He seemed to have hidden his face for a moment. He was up on the screen all the time. He'll come back in a moment. And he's an interesting person. He's Sergeant Zaheer Ali. He's a parent. He's, of course, a sergeant and an attorney at law. So we have a three-in-one kind of dimensional operation, a kind of Gary Sobers of this kind of situation. So, gentlemen, let me ask you to start off. Um, let's see if you can get at the heart of the problem. Mr. Ali, glad to see you back. If you take off your microphone, sorry, you unmute your microphone, that would be great. Wonderful. Is it Zaheer Ali or Ali Zaheer?
Zaheer Ali.
Zaheer Ali. Okay, I think I got it right there. Yeah. So what can you tell us about both of you, whichever one goes first? What is the heart of this problem as you have witnessed it and experienced it? Let me start with the teacher, Martin Lumpkin.
Thank you. I would like to start off by saying that schools are microcosms of society, and what takes place in society usually comes into the school. In the past, we would have a certain level of respect from the community, from the entire population. That is, the school environment was seen as a place of sanctity, a place of learning. Our educators, our teachers were seen as persons who were revered in society. And their role was not just in imparting knowledge, but in mediation and all other aspects. And over the years, we've seen an erosion of such. In some instances, we want to be the first to admit, in some instances, but not very large, we are ourselves to blame because we do have bad eggs in the basket. However, by and large and generally, our educators have been doing what is expected of them, and now more than ever, being expected to do what is not necessarily required of them. And that has to do a lot with parenting. And apart from the imparting of knowledge and the curriculum, more of the hidden curriculum is being thrust upon the educators in our schools. And we've seen a breakdown over the years, sometimes very slowly, sometimes picking up speed in the breakdown of family life and the involvement of community in the lives of our children. We can point out that now we have less of the sporting and cultural clubs within our society, within our communities, which will in part help guide our students and our children. But interestingly, conversely, we're seeing more and more faith-based organizations, and we the correlation or the how they relate, it's kind of strange, and probably we need to look at it. However, what is taking place in our schools being more highlighted because of the technology. More students have devices with cameras and so it's now trust on the social media more. And we have said to the general public that these videos should not be shared. They involve minors and they involve violence, and those kind of activities that we do not promote. And we encourage persons not to promote it because some of them see it as a way of getting, and mind my terms, I am in a transition probably from the current generation and my current generation. They get big up by these videos. They feel a sense and the likes and so on, which is it is something that needs to be addressed. And we met with the Honorable Minister this week, and he did rightfully say that we are treating symptoms and we are not treating causes. We usually have knee-jerk reactions to some of the instances. And I am also happy that my comrade colleague, Sergeant Ali, is here as well, because we did have some conversation last week in how we can together as organizations look at addressing it in the short term, but also in the long term as well. So I want
Let
to
me, mhm,
question Fraser. I
yeah.
yield at this.
And of course, my name is Tony, and feel free to call me Tony. Um, how uh, uh, have you seen this thing grown over the period of time? I don't know how long you've been a teacher, but have you observed in the classrooms that you've been teaching that the indiscipline, the violence, the attacks of one against the other? Have you seen them grown in terms of numbers and in terms of intensity of violence?
I've been in this system and continue to be in the system. This was my 35th year in education.
You're looking like a very young fellow, man.
If, yeah, relatively young, I should say,
All
young at
right.
heart. Young at heart. I started at a young age, right out of A levels, and I would have gotten into it. So I've been in the primary system. And what I've noticed over the years, there has been a increase in the incidence of violence and indiscipline, more so in the secondary schools. We do get it at the primary level. And I was fortunate to also teach in an all boys school. And as you know, that unisex, especially with boys, there are unique challenges. And I was privileged to have gone to that school, Sapara Boys RC School, and come back and teach there. And the culture and the teachers that we had in my time and going forward were very dedicated, were very much into ensuring that our boys get the attention that they need. And I want to kind of just throw off there. Now we are seeing more of these incidents with the female students as well. But in our times, we had, and even when I was in primary school, we had our incidents of fights
Of course.
and within the school and outside of the schools, that rivalry amongst our students. It
It's
is
a
not
kind of natural thing for teenagers, even in my time, way back then. There was always a little bit of a contest and so on, but I never saw or heard of a weapon,
no.
a knife, a gun, a gun. We didn't know what it looked like except for a picture. What, in your mind, has been a major cause of this increase and the intensity of the violence?
As I said earlier, the family life, the family structure. In our times, apart from the nuclear family, we had the extended family. And extended not only confined to blood, but extended to the community as well too. We have found that the involvement of parents and the community has declined, and there's an associated increase in the incidence of violence and
Okay.
indiscipline. Now, I
So
want to also,
all of the difficulties outside of the school impact on the school. Yes, that's
as
what
well,
you're
yes,
saying. Let me
yeah.
go to Sergeant Zaheer Ali, who, as I said, is a parent, is a police officer, and an attorney. When did you see this violence as it is now arising in the school system, and what has been your response to it?
Thank you very much, Tony, for the opportunity to contribute to this very important discussion. And I'm happy to join my good friend, Mr. Lumpkin, on the platform as well. I will take it from the angle and, probably just to build on what Mr. Lumpkin indicated in terms of, first off, that
I don't know, your microphone seems to be going off.
The internet connection.
Yeah, I think it says internet.
Unstable.
All right, go ahead. Let's see if you're there. It's been wavering all afternoon.
Yeah.
Try again. See if that you are there. I don't know if you're hearing me. Put up your hand if you're hearing me. No? Seem to have a problem there, Chalu.
Yeah, well, it's nothing I can do from my end. It's
Yeah,
probably wherever
yeah,
he's at.
yeah,
The internet. Well, we know how internet works, and
yeah.
that's a pitfall of internet radio. Yeah.
All right.
Well, let's hope he will
Mart,
come back in a short. So
all
you
right,
continue with Mr.
right.
He is
Lumpkin in the
muted
meanwhile.
right now.
Yeah, but Martin, you can go ahead by the time being. The question is now, how have teachers been dealing with this situation of the
As best
increasing
as they
violence?
as best as they can under the training that they would have had, which is very limited in terms of interventions, in terms of actually physically intervening. But in terms of having to de-escalate situations, the level of training of our educators throughout the system, from ECCE straight up to secondary, is very limited. So secondary school teachers would have a content degree, and then they would do the diploma in education, which looks at pedagogy. And in that area, you have very limited use of psychology and sociology of education. The primary school teachers in my time going to training college, that would have been some of the courses we would have done. The BEd now captures some of those as well. But in terms of the meaningful interventions, our teachers are very limited and would use their experience in attempting to intervene and to identify. One of the major things we need to do is identify the behaviors from an early age. Most times the interventions by the Ministry of Education is at the secondary level, but if it can be identified at the ECCE or the primary level, then we believe that it will be more meaningful and can curb and catch some of the deviant behaviors. One of the things as well, very quickly, is mental health. And mental health not only affects our adults, it affects children as well too, especially coming out of the COVID period. We need to really look at how that would have impacted on our students and really, tackle those.
Okay. Let's go back to Sergeant Ali. I think you're back with us.
Yeah, I think I'm back on. Yeah, I want to apologize for
Right.
my connection on this end. I don't know what you heard.
Yeah, well, no, start from the start. We didn't hear anything. So you go ahead. Seems to be following you around. No connection. Yeah, connection is bad. I don't know what area he is in, but the difficulties seem to be there. Unmute your microphone if you're hearing me. Let's see if we can go with that. Sergeant.
Well, he has everything muted right now, so I guess he's probably trying to sort out that situation where he's at.
Okay. All right.
So you see when he comes back in.
All right. So let's go back to the tutor president, Martin Lumpkin, who is the president of, as we said, Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association. We know that organization has a long history, and often we hear that its members are at they take the worst side of it because they're in the classroom. There are fights. There are times when the teachers become victims in the situation. How does a teacher deal with that, Martin?
So,
Zaheer, sorry, are you hearing me, Zaheer?
Yes.
I'm still not hearing. Yeah.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes. Go ahead. We're going to come back to you, Martin. Go ahead. Yeah, wherever he is, there are difficulties there.
If we look at our school system and our schools in particular, schools are in some way connected to a community, parents, guardians, as the case may be. So that immediately identifies that what's happening in the wider society cannot be divorced from what's happening, whether directly or indirectly, in our school system. So I think it's important to begin with that and not be naive to what's happening in the wider society. And as Mr. Lumpkin indicated, that the environmental influence or impact must be a serious consideration. Now, having said that, the question that you pose in relation to whether, in fact, or where, at what time this school violence and this issue of violence emerged, I'll say that, school violence, from my respectful view, would have been around. As children, you would expect some level of confrontation, you would expect some conflict, and some behavior that may not be acceptable. But what we have found in recent years, and perhaps maybe an impact of or the influence of social media, you realize that what's happening in our school system is now manifesting itself in a wider sphere, and perhaps from a psychological context, and even from a legal context, the persons are probably achieving some level of gratification for their acts of violence within the school system. And, having said that, we also have to take into consideration that we are...
Sorry, before you move on, give us an explanation of this level of gratification for violence that you talk about.
Well, when you look at young children, they will be looking for identity, and the fact that they are seeing themselves published widely, and especially in the case where they are dominating a particular conflict, that in itself, one can attach, the recognition, even if it's in a negative context, but they are being published. People are speaking about it. They are seeing themselves, in a wide context. People are asking them questions. People are talking about the issue. So, just looking at the fact that it can, where you may have had, just about 5 or 10 persons exposed to it. Now with social media, you are seeing thousands and even millions of people being exposed to it. So, we ought to be very careful in terms of...
So in a way, what the exposure is doing is giving them a measure of that self-confidence that they lack in themselves.
Well, definitely. I think that, it's something that we need to consider, because, as I said before, because of the children are looking for identity. They are looking for recognition. And, as I said, we must not be naive to think that, okay, they are going to school and, it's just about academics. They are finding themselves, and as I said before, very critical, based on my introductory remarks. They are coming from communities and that have been plagued in some instances with serious gang violence, serious gang association. So could you imagine that children are in a school fraternity and they may have come from a particular community, and in that community, there are warring fractions. You may find that the children are also taking a similar approach to be able to join that conflict, taking it from the community into the school compound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me go back to Martin Lumpkin of Tutor. You talk about the kind of assistance that is required. I know years ago we used to talk about and interview people like Steve Williams, who provided psychological, some kind of impact on students and so on. But I'm not too certain about that kind of assistance in the schools today, or is it expected that the teacher has to be a specialist in psychology and child rearing and all of those things also? Microphone.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm muted while a sergeant was speaking. My apologies. To an extent, the teachers expected, the educators expected to display some level of interrogation when it comes to that. But as I would have previously said, our training is limited in that aspect. Hence the reason we rely on, there is a very essential group within the teaching service, within the Ministry of Education, called the Student Support Services Division. And that division is made up of guidance counselors, special education teachers, social workers, and they would provide the type of support when it comes to the intervention for the students. Now, the identification of something that needs to be attended to starts with the teacher, and the referral process starts there. and then goes outside the school to SSSD. I have to say that the SSSD is under-resourced and does not have the required amount of personnel. So
Sorry,
school social
can you say the full name of it? I think you said something like
student
SSJ. Yes, go ahead.
SSSD, Student Support Services Division. So it's a division within the Ministry of Education. And so for example, the guidance counselors and the social workers and these special education teachers, they have clusters of schools. So they do not attend to one school. They attend to clusters of 4 or 5, depending on the area. And when you have multiple incident or multiple cases of students who are displaying certain behaviors or who needs intervention, it cannot be meaningful if they have to be in other schools at various times. So the first aspect of it, we admit, and I believe the Ministry of Education admits, the necessity of this division. However, the resourcing of it. So quite recently, the ministry had schools of focus. Those are schools that were underperforming, and they would have employed persons for these schools directly, only dedicated to those schools. Why not do that for the other schools in the education system? Because we can see, without any sort of information, data right now, but by anecdotal, that every school has incidents or issues with students who display certain behaviors or require intervention. So that is one aspect. And then child psychologists, it really depends on the Ministry of Health, their child psychologists to attend to the districts as well as the schools. There should be at least one attending to the schools in every district in the first instance, and then could be expanded. So those are the type of support that the schools require at this time.
Sergeant Ali, at times, I suppose in frustration and a sense of wanting something to be done positive about it, there are calls from members of society, parents, etc., that there should be a police presence in the schools, especially those schools which have a record of this kind of violence, not only violence amongst the students, but also in terms of violence against the teachers. You have drug selling in the schools, etc., etc. Is there justification and is there a requirement for the police intervention in the school system in a significant kind of way?
Well, I think that's a very very sensitive and very significant question. And I'll begin by indicating structure and system for dealing with school violence must be reviewed immediately. And just by way of reference and without prejudice to any part, matrix to deal with in our nation schools, you'll recognize that process for dealing with discipline. Yet you can have a single incident that can be
we're not picking
just to inform our listeners.
It will require immediate police intervention, determining whether in fact there's a need for. You hearing me now?
Yeah, hearing you, you're going and coming. Just to indicate our listeners, this is nothing on our part. This is a feeling of the internet connection, so it's dropping out sometimes and going smooth. Let's go ahead, Sergeant Ali.
Okay, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Thinking about whether in fact there's a need for a system. I think we need to start by
we're not getting Sergeant
looking at the school matrix for dealing with discipline. And if hello,
Sergeant Ali, is there any way that you can reposition where you are at? Or is there any other area you might go to see if the internet might be a little better? Can you do that?
Yeah, because what is happening is that you're going and coming. Sometimes we hear you, sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
And just indicate to our listeners, it's nothing on our part or even on the sergeant's part.
Hello?
It's internet interactive. This seems like a little bit better. Try it now, Sergeant.
Yes. Are you hearing me?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
better, much better now.
Yes. So I'm saying that in order to really answer whether, in fact, there's a need for greater involvement of the police within the school system to deal with discipline and school violence, I think we need to look at presently what exists in terms of the matrix. So I would like to begin by looking at that, as an immediate need to reform. Now, secondly, you said something very important, and I want to share that view, that when you look at a particular school that may be coming from a particular community or in a particular community, or students may be coming from a particular community that forms the population of a particular school, we must be reading the intelligence and be sensitive to understand whether, in fact, that particular school need a specific risk and threat assessment, so that you will be able to determine whether, in fact, school A, and I'm not going to name a school, whether school A may, in fact, require such a strong police presence, if not within the school compound, but within the vicinity, or frequent intervention to ensure that we at least fence or insulate that school from any influence that the community that may be plagued by gang violence, and you indicated a while ago, or may be exposed to dangerous drugs and other ills from stepping into the school system. So I think it has to be a very fluid approach, and I think in the past, respectfully, I think we may have tailored matrix to deal with discipline, but it is not specific or not being applied with consciously of looking at particular areas in Trinidad and Tobago that may require a particular response. So without being prejudicial to any geographical area, you may look at a particular area and say, okay, let's say, for example, an area in Port of Spain, that dealing with school violence in Port of Spain as compared to another area, you may be looking at different culture, different tradition, different symptoms, different causes. So I think this has to be looked at, with some specifics, but definitely police now, based on what we are seeing, and I want to heed Tony and Mr. Lumpkin, I want to heed the strong call by the Honorable Prime Minister with reference to applying the law, and I'll tell you why, from a legal context. If you look, and respectfully, I don't think that the Prime Minister is saying anything that is out of context, because if you look at the law, a child in Trinidad and Tobago, or a person, I should say, over 7, can attract criminal liability if that person appreciates his or her conduct. So over 7, you can attract criminal liability. So that's one. Now, there are distinction in terms of, for example, like the Sexual Offences Act, it may be an issue of 12 and over. But generally speaking, over 7, you can attract criminal liability. So when the Prime Minister makes that statement to hold children accountable by virtue of arrest and, if possible, charges, and take them before the court, I think that what she's just doing is basically applying the law when there's a contravention of the criminal law. And we have seen in recent times where it's not only a mere assault, it's an assault that occasions actual bodily harm, in some cases, grievous bodily harm. So I think it's a very serious matter. And applying the rule of law, I think it's important, because you're looking at rehabilitation, you're looking at restorative justice, but importantly, retribution is also important to be a deterrent for other children who may be inclined to behave similarly.
Right. So in other words, you're saying that when children see some punishment is being meted out to those who, go too far and break the law, that might have some kind of effect on them to stop them from going down that road. Well, let me take up something that I myself asked. If you start putting stronger police presence, security, let's say it's either police officers, genuine police officers, or the security guards system. If you start strengthening the system in certain areas, or putting police officers in those areas, there will be a kind of stigma that will be attached to those schools, and eventually the children who go into those schools.
Well, that is always a debatable issue. And my question, back to that particular issue will be, okay, if we are facing a very serious, troubling issue, And we are seeing how it's manifesting itself and the impact that it's having on the population, the school population, and by extension, the national community. I think that sometimes it may call for drastic action. So what we can do is basically start it as probably as an interim intervention and see how it works, so that it's not something that you're going to be applying, in my view, as a continuous intervention. So, it's something that has to remain fluid, but Tony and Mr. Lumpkin, I myself, as a parent as well, have looked at what's happening in our nation's schools. And when you have your child going to school for an education and overall development, that right to safety and security is of fundamental importance, because without that, you have no right to education, or you cannot promote right to education. So I think the times that we are living in call for some drastic actions. And yes, the psychologists, respectfully, and other professionals may say, okay, maybe it's probably of a draconian, maybe a harsh intervention. But I think that at this time, we don't have it, and look what's unfolding. So I think it's important for us to make that statement. But as I said before, it has to be under continuous review. And that now supports what I said earlier in terms of when you had a matrix design in 2022, and Mr. Lumpkin, without prejudice to the education ministry, when you had a design in 2022, we are in 2025, which should be looking to be reviewing that on a yearly basis to determine whether, in fact, that matrix is actually causing the impact and promoting positive discipline in our schools. So that, like anything else, as a society, we have to make it a study. So yes, Mr. Tony, we will be, we will have, our critics saying, well, okay, maybe we are causing a paramilitary situation, or maybe, too many police officers, or maybe even the precepted MTS officers. But at the end of the day, if we are looking at the protection of our nation's children in light of what we are seeing with violence, I think that we need to match it with the necessary intervention that will be required.
All right, so let me hear the president of Tutor, Mr. Lumpkin, your view on that. And it can be a measure of protection for your teachers, because sometimes we hear reports that teachers, get roughed up, get injured, etc., in a melee that is caused in some instances.
Yes, I totally agree with Sergeant Ali in terms of it being a short-term measure. Quite interestingly, Tony and Sergeant, we visited Providence Schools earlier this year. There was an invasion by some persons, and we went to lend support to our members there. And we were outside doing the interview before we went into the teachers, and I looked at Providence. I looked at the fencing, perimeter fencing. I looked at the gate, I looked at the security guards, and I'm saying to myself, if one did not know this was a school, it looked like a penal system, a jail, in other words. And we have reached to that stage where our schools look like somewhat jails. And that has a psychological effect, whether we like it or not. It will play on the minds of persons, our occupants and so. So in terms of a short term, yes, we are saying that there has to be attention on all levels, multi-pronged approach. We can't just look at legislative, law enforcement, judiciary, and then the penal system. There has to be interventions before we apply some of these areas and so. And that needs the attention of not only government. We have to give them the opportunity, but there's non-governmental organizations. There are also faith-based organizations that need to be part of this as well. So to have regular patrols or the presence of our law enforcement to deter in the first instance, we will agree with for the protection, but it cannot stop there. There needs to be greater intervention in dealing with the root causes of this violence and crime and criminality.
Give us some appreciation of your teachers. What do they feel? They must report to tutor about their feelings, about their sense of security, their concerns, their fears, etc. Of course, their concern for the children, perhaps those students who are not involved in the violence, but who are disturbed in terms of their own learning. What do they think about the system? On some ideas as to their feedback to tutor as to what is to be done.
And it concerns all our educators, whether they are directly or indirectly affected by crime, criminality, violence, and indiscipline. And one can appreciate you cannot have a safe area of learning if you always in the back of your mind feel that there's going to be some incident or I am going to be attacked in some way. And so there is genuine concern in the part of a lot of our teachers. Some are expressing because there are schools that are relatively safe and are untouched at this time. But generally, within the school system, there are concerns, and even in this wider society as well. Some of our educators are concerned about going to teach in certain areas, as Sergeant would have said. Just the mere fact of reaching to the school compound safely and exiting and reaching home safely is a concern as well too, whereby there may be some safety within the walls of the institution. There are impacts as it relates to outside of the school. And I really don't feel that we should continue along this manner. As Sergeant said, drastic times require drastic action, but it shouldn't be that we become comfortable with those actions. There must be a level of trying to get to the root cause of the what is taking place in society.
Yeah. I don't know what the ratio is, but there is a sense over the period of time, over decades really, is that whereas you had a strong male presence amongst teachers, is that you have quite a large percentage of females. And in some people's minds, that not that it should lead to delinquency, but that students, that's not something on the part of the teachers, but that perhaps male students feel that they can deal with female teachers in a certain kind of way. Do you get that kind of report from your teachers?
Not openly. There may be some conversations that allude to that, but you're quite right. The ratio of male to female is quite a big gap. It's over 85. We estimate
Wow.
90% of female
Ooh.
and the rest male. One
Well,
of the things
I didn't think it was so wide. I was thinking 65, 35, something like that. Yeah,
I
go
can tell
ahead.
you the school I was at last, Granville RC, I was the only male and I was the principal, and we had 7 female teachers. So I was the
Mm.
only male. So you can see the ratio there. And within the primary school, it's more female to male than secondary. Some secondary schools will have more male, but not more than the female. But what is quite interesting as well, and when we looked at it, is that in most cases, children at the infant level didn't have the interaction of a male teacher. Actually, some students only got the interaction of a male teacher when they reach probably standard 3, standard 4 into 5. Usually that's the area. So whereby the influence of a male teacher, and in some instances where students don't have a male figure at home, they don't get that influence there. So they, and one can appreciate the value of having a male figure in your life. It's not that I discount the female, but there should be some level of interaction of
Some
males.
kind of
And that,
balancing, sure. Yeah.
yes. And that's one of the challenges we have in the teaching service as well too. Um, that particular instance of male to female ratio. And we always try to encourage our male members of the community to get into teaching. Teaching is a laudable profession, but some persons are not attracted salary wise, etc., that caring and nurturing aspect of it. So it's something we have to look at carefully as well.
So is it a question of males not aspiring to teaching? Is it, you mentioned the salary, perhaps males go into areas where there is a larger possibility of a larger salary. What is happening? What are the dynamics of this transformation that has taken place?
When we had the energy boom, a lot of our male students were attracted to that area because of quite frankly the salary, but also the hands-on approach as well too. Um, Males usually are more inclined to hands-on approaches and to even the law enforcement areas as well too. We are guilty in Trinidad and Tobago of not promoting teaching as the profession that it is really. There isn't, we haven't seen a career, an actual career path for teaching. And we, our educators, are sometimes guilty of telling our children, our biological children, and the students before us, don't get in teaching, right? Because we are in it and we know what it entails. And so, without really thinking of what we are doing in terms of that skills and human resource, and it's something we have to reflect on and try to promote. Even within, I know one government tried to have a university that was dedicated to education and then it morphed into other areas. That in itself, and I want to say the when it comes to technical vocational, our honorable minister says that they have a career path in mind, which we welcome and look forward to. But the mere fact that we are not encouraging our young persons to get into teaching and seeing teaching as a viable and laudable profession, it's probably one of our downfalls that we need to improve on.
As a parent, Sergeant Ali, speaking as a parent, do you feel that male female ratio is contributing to some of the difficulties, and I don't want to use violence all the time, but some of the difficulties that are being experienced in the schools?
I think that if you look at it from a gender context, one may say, okay, when you look at the male, may have some advantages as opposed to the female, but I think that I would not want to be landing it, or promoting that issue of that gender aspect. But I want to look at it in the context where, and perhaps Mr. Lumpkin might be best placed, to assist us with answering this question in terms of what, in terms of the training that these teachers are exposed to, and emphasizing upon the females about a need to be firm, and strong, at least to try and match, a masculine presence or appearance. So I think that we need to look at it and see, yes, if you look at our society, perhaps the female are gravitating towards the education system. So you perhaps will have that issue of the ratio where female outnumbers the male. But at the same time, we need to ensure that the females who are coming into the schools appreciate that at this time it may be more than the dissemination of teaching a maths or a science or an English. It may be a situation of, can you command the discipline of that particular school and that particular class? So I think that probably looking at reform in terms of the recruitment of teachers and probably the curriculum, so that we have teachers that appreciate and understand they need to be stern in the school system. So that's how I'll answer it. But to say that I'm going to say, well, okay, that you must have a male in a particular given situation. I think it might be a bias, and I want to ensure that there's equality, and I think it's more of the training and the appreciation as to the role and functions that a teacher is called upon to perform.
Yeah. I must say that I feel a little bit of Martin Lumpkin's pain to answer that question. After all, he just said 95% of his members are females, and if he says anything that will go against that, he could be in trouble. Martin?
I want to say, please don't misinterpret in terms of our female teachers not being, strong in discipline and etc. But the mere presence of males, and it doesn't have to only be in terms of being stern or so on, but that male figure within the lives of our students. Some of them will go through the entire education system and not have it at home and in the education system. Males do play an important part in the lives of our children. And I don't want to discount the contributions of our female. Please don't let it be a male female kind of a thing. But to actually know that the males do play a part. And sometimes the only time, Sergeant, they get interaction is by a male police officer intervening. Uh, you know, yeah. So please appreciate where I'm coming from. I'm not discounting our females in terms of that.
Those 95% of female teachers might take you on tomorrow. And
Yes, yes, yes.
seriously though, we're talking with the president of Tutor, Mr. Martin Lumpkin, and Sergeant Zaheer Ali, who is a parent, attorney, and of course a policeman, and therefore getting a sense of how the violence is impacting on students in terms of learning. And let me start there by asking the teacher, how is this resort to violence, this disruption? Okay, so there might be a violent act or two on a day or two, or whatever the frequency is. But the aggression must surely be in the class all the time in certain instances. How is that impacting on the learning of the students in the schools?
It does impact negatively within the schools that are most affected. And I want to also say the majority of our students are law abiding and they are there at schools to learn. It's just a few disruptive. But the uncertainty that our educators face when they come to school as well, in that they they're unsure if this particular child will act up and disrupt the class and so on. Now, there is also validity in the way we treat our students as well too, and the methodology by which we teach and learn. If a student isn't challenged or the student doesn't find any credibility in being in school, they will always get into trouble. They will always seek attention where it is where they can get it by being whatever disruptive. And so there's that side as well to how we engage those students. But the psychological effect and the disruption to teaching and learning is real when we do have those deviant um, children in our schools, and we need to attend to those as well too. And sometimes we try a one size fit all throughout our schools. Schools need to look at it on a case by case and deal with it based on what shows up. It is affecting some of our schools, some more than others, but it does affect the teaching learning process.
Mhm. So we have a secondary and a tertiary impact, not only the violence in the schools in itself, but also on the learning process, the examination, etc., etc. Difficult question. Is it more prevalent in some schools as opposed to other schools? I'm talking about the breakout of violence. Do we get it in certain kinds of schools, certain geographical areas of schools, or is it spread all over the school system?
It's the spread is general. We do find that some instances, some geographical areas, but to say that, we going to stereotype the areas based on, what takes place in the community, it does happen sometimes, but we do find it affecting other areas as well too. There are some schools that need more intervention and should be look at more carefully.
Mhm. What has generally been, or maybe I should keep that question. I was going to talk about the Ministry of Education's role in all of this, but we will come back to that in a moment. Let me ask Sergeant Ali about the attitude of the police service. And I'm not asking you to speak for all of the police service. Maybe you can talk about yourself. When there are reports to the police about the breakout of violence in one area or the other area, um, how do the police officers react in those situations? Oh Lord, it's them people again, they can't behave themselves. I'm just, wondering what happens.
You know, um, Tony, you're asking, some very piercing questions, and to look at it from a TTPS context in terms of the response, there may be varying thought process in terms of when you're hearing that there's violence erupting in a school system, and it may be for many different reasons. For example, just the mere fact that you're dealing with children and the sensitivity of dealing with children. And then, from a legalistic context, we have something called the judge's rules, which gives some directions for children as to how to approach children and handling children. So it's not a simple process, when you're making those sort of interventions. And I must also balance it, that in some instances we have not seen the level of response that one should direct when we are seeing violence in schools. And I think that is an area, and I'm happy, and I'll take this opportunity to, acknowledge and salute the incoming Commissioner of Police. When he was interviewed, and one of the areas that he identified was school violence and dealing with school violence. So I'm happy that, the leader of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has now signaled where one of his focus will lie. And I'm happy and encouraged by that. And I'm sure Mr. Lumpkin will be encouraged by that as well. So that question in terms of while there may be a good response in some instance, while there may be an effective response, there are also situations where you have not gotten the level of response that one requires. And I'm going based on a recent discussion with the president of Tutor. When our discussions, it was tabled that in some instances, the police are called in, but you're not generating or not getting the level of response that one required. So I think that the police response is definitely something that need to be reviewed immediately. And I think that also, bridge, when I spoke about looking at the matrix of dealing with school violence, I think that when you're looking at the response, you cannot, dismiss what is expected of the police in a given situation. But there are varying situations. Different stations, different divisions may have good response, but there are other instances where there are reports of, inaction in some cases on the part of the police. So again, it's an area that we need to look at. I'm happy that the commissioner has signaled that area as an area that requires urgent attention.
Yeah. I asked that question, and in the back of my mind was an incident which I was involved in. It turned out to be quite humorous, but it was serious in a different kind of way. One day, that must have been 2 or 3 years ago, 4 or 5 dogs just turned up. We live in a kind of cul-de-sac area. Not too many people live in the area. And so to see 4 or 5 dead dogs one morning on the street gave us a cause for concern. So I called the nearby police station and asked them whatever I asked them. And then I called back again. And there were 2 female officers involved. The second female officer, when she picked up the phone, she told her colleague, "The dog man here again." Of course, I laughed, but of course I gave her a little piece of my mind. Not anything crazy that, you can't serve the people who pay your salary in that kind of manner. But I make that as something that the police may say, "Oh God, ex-school again. What is wrong with these children? What is wrong with their parents?" I'm sure that must rile up some police officers from time to time.
Well, definitely. Tony, when you look at the present strategic plan and operational plan of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, you are seeing an area in relation to school violence that, has been earmarked, for a proper response on the part of the police. But, when we are speaking about public safety and public and security, the school fraternity cannot be ruled out. It cannot be saying, okay, we are speaking public safety and security, but we are interested in what's happening in the school, and vice versa. What's happening in the school, as we said earlier, is connected, whether directly or indirectly, to the community or to a parent, a household. So in my respectful view, I will always advise strongly the police to be paying particular attention to when there's issues of youth delinquency and school violence, because it's also an avenue where, if we are not careful, can be the recruitment ground for criminal gangs at a later date, because children are already demonstrating and getting the opportunity to engage in acts of violence. So it wouldn't be difficult to put offensive weapons, because they already have the experience and they already have the propensity to engage in violence. So I think that from a TTPS context, if we are looking at crime prevention, we should be excited and interested to engage the school, engage with the stakeholders. And I must, salute Mr. Lumpkin in terms of the leadership role that he and his association is taking to make a contribution to dealing with violence. And when you see stakeholders who are interested, what will be expected of the TTPS in terms of our community engagement and partnership is to reach out and hold the hands of these stakeholders to see how best that we can make our intervention. And Tony, it would be remiss of me if I don't take this opportunity to also, we have spoken about the teachers, we have spoken about law enforcement, we have spoken about the various stakeholders. A very important stakeholder here, and you were alluding to it a while ago when you spoke about when there are issues where children are impacting the education of other children in the school system. That takes us straight to a very, very important stakeholder, and that stakeholder is the parents. And I have advocated previously where under the legislation, the Children's Act, and perhaps the Honorable Prime Minister, by saying to arrest and where there's evidence to charge, I think that person needs to also understand that when you are placing an offender before the court, it's not only about being retributive against that individual, but it also opens the domain for the court to bring the parents before the court, or to call the parents before the court, bring the children's authority before the court, so we can start having an understanding as to why this child is behaving in the way that this child is behaving. Is it what? That this child is in poverty? Is it that this child is abused? Is it that this child is exposed to a dangerous drug? So this is where you're getting the opportunity, by engaging the child offender, to be able to look at the holistic approach in terms of going beyond the child and looking at the home and the parents. So I think that's a critical area that some people may miss. But if you look at the Children's Act, yes, it can be improved, but it's an area that in my view, we are not exploring to hold parents accountable when children are impacting the school population, and by extension, the education of other children within the school system.
Okay, just to indicate to our listeners, viewers, that we are talking about violence in school, which has become one of the major problems of this society today, and the inability so far of the Ministry of Education, the police service, the parents, the teachers, everybody involved. I am not trying to locate the blame for one group or the other, and it may not even be blame. It may be a sense of not understanding and appreciating the nature of this problem and all of the implications thereof. So we are talking with the president of Tutor, Martin Lumpkin, and we are talking with Sergeant Zaheer Ali, who is a parent, an attorney, and of course, a police officer. Chalo, let's give our listeners an appreciation of the station, and we come back to the discussion in a moment.
Show. Rise and Shine with Wendell Stevens and Richard Raghubarsing, weekdays, from 6 o'clock to 9 a.m. Start your day feeling good, energized, and informed as we tackle the biggest issues of the day, get you where you need to be on time, and keep you in the know about everything that matters. We bring you insightful discussions, expert analysis, and the latest updates so you're always ahead of the curve. Mornings matter. Your voice matters. And it all starts right here on New Era TT Radio, Net Radio. The Net Radio Breakfast Show, weekdays 6 to 9 a.m. Wake up informed and stay ahead.
This summer, give your child skills of a lifetime with several boot camp. Children between the ages of 5 to 17 come enjoy Children Iron Chef competition. Your child will learn to prepare healthy breakfast, lunch, dinner, CPR, first aid, and conflict management. With field trip, your child will be given free apron and certification upon completion. Call 492-7397 or 336-4935. Institute of Health and Fitness Company Limited, located at number 79 St. Vincent Street, Tunapuna.
S&H Rumbox, 137 Western Main Road, St. James, for all your retail and wholesale needs for alcohol and non-alcoholic beverages. Call us at 686-0599 or visit us at 137 Western Main Road, St. James. S&H Rumbox, drinking out of the box.
Advertise with us on New Era TT Radio, the fastest growing streaming platform for talk in Trinidad and Tobago. Audio and video ads welcome. Elevate your brand with us. Connect with us at newerattradio@yahoo.com or call us at 299-5156. Now what are you waiting for?
All right, everybody, and of course, remember you can advertise with us here on New Era TT Radio. Yeah, we're taking care of you. And remember, you can find us at newerattradio.com. You can also find us at New Era TT Radio on TuneIn for all your smart devices, Alexa and Google devices. And you can pick us up on YouTube, like you're looking at us here now on YouTube also. You can also pick us up on Facebook, Instagram, and also on TikTok. And we stream our morning show from 6 to 8 a.m. on M&E TV, which carries about 5 or 6 of the cable channels such as Tricor, Flow, Digicel. So there are a number of ways that you can find us. So go look for us near TT Radio. We are back with you, Tony.
Chalo, I want to suggest that we allow Sparrow a verse or two before we continue. Very important calypso.
All right, okay.
Parents of our nation have got an obligation, that's to take proper care of their child. Soon they will be men and women, soon you will be old and bent. Teach them the correct way, don't let it run wild. Children must learn from the time that they're young the difference between right and wrong. Not knowing better, they're bound to get burned. So make sure your children learn. Start for children cannot bring a happy end. To come from a broken home is a curse. First an inferiority complex, too much emphasis on sex. Police, orphanage and jail only makes them worse. Children must grow in the light of true love, God's precious gift from above. Not knowing better, they're bound to get burned. So make sure your children learn.
As only the mighty Sparrow can put it. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, just hearing it, I have jotted down a number of things to present to the president of Tutor, Mr. Martin Lumpkin, and Sergeant Zaheer Ali, who's a parent, attorney, of course, a police officer. Abuse. abused children in the school system must present a certain kind of difficulty for learning, for discipline, etc., etc. Mr. Lumpkin.
Yes, Tony, and I know it's way into your program, and please address me as Martin as well too. I guess
Mhm.
we get to know more of each other, so I think.
Sure.
Yes, we have a number of students who are going through a multitude, various types of abuse from the home, from the community, and in some instances, unfortunately, from some of our educators who are persons of who have great responsibility, but would have breached those responsibilities. And I want to say off the cuff, we had a meeting with Teacher and Service Commission, and they raised some of their concerns, and we echoed their sentiment. The tutor will not condone abuse of any child in any form of fashion within our school system. We discourage it with the greatest terms. But there has to be some level of first identification and then intervention. Our members are quite aware of the Sexual Offences Act, and that's one form of abuse, and their responsibility as persons of who are in charge of the children in local parentis as such, but other areas as well too. And once identified, there needs to be the support from the agencies. I know TTPS has the witness that unit that does counseling and so on, and I have intervened in some instances at our schools. But there needs to be a greater and a wider catchment of this within the Ministry of Education and other governmental agencies, because we are realizing that there are a number of students who face these challenges and coming to school, some of them, bottling up inside. And what will happen if it's not treated with, when it explodes, it will affect our nation.
Yeah. And we're talking also about children who are abused outside of the school system, from their homes, from the communities, etc. They must bring a certain kind of challenge, because a student like that does not leave his or her problems outside of the school. They go into the school system with those problems, and difficulties arise for not only the children, that child, and the teacher, but for the other students in the class.
Yes, they do. Sergeant here, just correct me in terms of the unit that does those counseling and intervention. I think I got that unit wrong. However, yes, they do. They do bring
Victims unit.
victims in. Yes, thank you. They do pose challenges, and sometimes they are very outspoken and they lash out. But then there are some who are introverted and they pull in. Those are two different types of challenges that our educators face. And if we cannot get through to them at that level, then it's sad to think of what will happen to them in society when they leave the school system.
Sergeant, your take on all of this? Sergeant Ali, talking to you, asking you about your take on this whole system of abuse, or the children who come into school abused outside of the school, and they bring their problems inside of the school system, and everybody suffers because of it.
Well, I want to begin, Tony. It's my respectful view that sensitization and awareness, I think, is an important area for us to begin. I think that Mr. Lumpkin have spoken about a very important piece of legislation in terms of the Sexual Offences Act as amended. And I would like to, conjunct that with the Children's Act as the principal act for the protection of our nation's children, and also legislation like the Trafficking in Persons Act that speaks about the exploitation of children. And the reason why I'm saying that, I think that many of us, and I'm looking at it in different contexts in Trinidad and Tobago, we are governed by the rule of law, but I think many people have an appreciation and understanding for the rule of law that governs our behavior, our conduct. So I think that from an educational context, I think we need to emphasize among the stakeholders the importance of when we identify abuse, whether it be sexual abuse, whether it be forced labor, whatever it may be, prostitution, whatever it may be. I think it's important for us to educate our society to be able to be in a position to be able to detect and identify these offenses. I think that an aggressive campaign where our children is concerned, we need to look at that. However, when you're speaking about the support services, I think Mr. Lumpkin, I will be interested to hear what is the composition or who comprises the student support services, or whether there is a situation where you have to deal with cases on an individual basis to be able to bring in experts, because I'm aware that the Children's Authority will have some resources, but the question that one may have to answer, is there proper streamlining of the resources and the expertise that are available, for example, under the Children's Authority and to a certain extent under the Special Victims Unit? Are these agencies really playing that effective role to be able to treat with issues of abuse, so that if you detect an abuse outside, you realize that should that child continue to enjoy an education in a particular environment, or should that child be placed in an environment that is suited to deal with that child's situation? So I think that the issue of dealing with abuse is similar to the issue of violence, where we need to be able to have a proper response in relation to how we are dealing with abuse, whether it be outside the school system or whether it's a situation where it's outside and coming into the school system. So education, and then again looking at our structure and our system to be able to deal with those issues. And the recent reference by Mr. Lumpkin, as I said before, with that Sexual Offences Act, Tony, I don't think that that legislation, and from a children context, especially where we are looking at the duty of parents, the duty of teachers, the duty of persons who may be in a relationship of trust and responsibility, I don't think that we are appreciating and we are really paying particular attention to that. And what you have found as well, we live in a society where persons may know, but they are reluctant to come forward for many different reasons. So what you have abuse continuing because of a failure to report matters that are coming to the attention of teachers. And may I say as well, and I'm very passionate about this, because don't only look for actual evidence of abuse. Look for where there may be intelligence or suspicion, so that we can engage. It may be just the timing that you require to prevent an abuse. So, I think it's a very sensitive area, but I think it's an area that, again, needs an overall review to determine whether, in fact, we are effectively set up to treat with these sort of issues.
Right. Before I bring Mr. Lumpkin in, let me stay with Sergeant Ali and ask you about the punishment that is meted out, the system, the structure of punishment that is meted out to children who go the wrong way. We had one recently, and I think there was some intervention by the Ministry of Education, the Minister of the Ministry, that the child should be put out of school for a period of time and so on. I'm not talking about that particular incident, but rather, what are the systems of punishments that are incorporated in the whole education system? And Mr. Lumpkin can come in into that also.
Well, I think, Tony, when you just made reference to, if we are looking at it from a suspension, indiscipline context, I think expulsion and so forth, I think that is, clearly tailored in the system. The question is whether, in fact, it is sufficient. That's a question that needs to be answered by the respective authorities. But from a situation where children are charged with criminal offences, there is a thinking. Again, looking at the international guidance, international law, and how it influences our domestic law. Children, they try to avoid the retributive or the punitive in terms of custodial sentence. But at the end of the day, it's all dependent on the nature of the offence. So if you are seeing things like murder, you may have situations where there may be custodial sentence if a person is found guilty. And the question is the institution. Normally you hear about the YTC and those sort of places, but I think that that's an area that we need to look at, where children, and especially where the call has been made to arrest and where there's evidence to charge children, even if children are not going to be placed or be remanded in custody, or even if they are convicted, the custodial sentence is something that has to be carefully thought out, because you are still looking to act in the best interest of the child. So if you are looking to apply that particular process, there must be proper institutions that can now be properly prepared and with the infrastructure and other facility and resource to receive these children, so that you can have effective rehabilitation to ensure that that child in quick time is reintegrated with the society that child came from. So to answer your question, custodial sentences are very sensitive matters, and it's more looking at other means of sanctions, all geared towards the best interest of the child. But the way it's configured as well, we cannot rule out parents, because if children are charged and they are convicted, let's say, for example, an offense is attracting a fine, the parents are now called upon to be able to satisfy that fine that has been imposed by a court. So if parents were not conscious, they need to be conscious that their child's actions and the consequences that may flow can easily call the parents to be able to be to account and to also be responsible for other sanctions that may flow from it.
Mr. Lumpkin, Tutor President, your response to all of this?
Sergeant Ali would have spoken about the school's code of conduct as well as the discipline matrix. And within the discipline matrix, you have to have sanctions that are appropriate for the offenses. And it's something that has to be reviewed. And so when it comes to suspension is really to protect the other occupants of the school from the particular incident. We use suspension generally for indiscipline and violence, but there's suspension in terms of a health threat as well too. And what it does is removes the threat from the school so that the others are not affected by it. When it comes to violence and indiscipline, most times the students doesn't display that overnight. It happens along stages, and if the discipline matrix is effectively implemented, then the intervention should be there before suspension. Now, there are some instances where suspension should be applied immediately, and even expulsion from the school. But what happens so as I said, suspension and expulsion is to protect those in the school. What happens to that individual when you suspend or expel? In the past, the student was allowed to go back to society and sometimes would get greater involvement in other areas and then come back to the school, with more tools to disrupt. There must be some intervention. There has been attempts in the past, and the Honorable Prime Minister did speak about when we suspend or expel a child from the school. There has to be that intervention, and Sergeant spoke about rehabilitation and getting the child fit back into the school system and society. So we would encourage, when necessary, once the necessary interventions have taken place, and suspension in some instances should be the last resort, or expulsion should be the last resort. But there must be intervention along the way and with the person, the child who has been expelled or suspended.
I don't know if there is some kind of rehabilitation process after suspension of a student. A student gives trouble in the class, whatever the trouble it is, and it amounts to being suspended for 3 weeks, a month, 2 weeks, whatever the figure is. The child goes home, probably into a difficult environment, and stays 2 or 3 weeks, and then comes back in the school. But nothing has been done to correct the problems that the child obviously has.
Yes, and that is the situation in most cases. As I said, in the past, there was the attempt to deal with it, It has not been consistent and continued, and we are hopeful with this administration that something will be put in place for rehabilitation to bring, because you ultimately want the child to be rehabilitated and reintegrated into the school system and eventually into society. But when you send them out there and the wolves are amongst them, and gangs are seeing this, and they can recruit them and then send them back into the schools, that will be counterproductive and against what we really want in the system.
Chalo, I want to. Sorry, just before you, before you do that, just let me give Chalo an assignment that he could be looking at while you are speaking. One of our famous calypsonians sang a song some years ago, 20, 25 years ago, about taking taking spirituality out of the curriculum. Maybe we can play that. I'm sure that he asks the question or makes the statement much better than I can.
No problem.
So
I'll look for that for you.
after we get Sergeant Ali's statement, we can go to that as a means of getting discussion going. Sergeant Ali.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'm sorry to interject if I disturb your thoughts.
No, not at all, not at all.
Yeah, so I just want to get back to that issue in terms of the suspension, and then you're returning back to school, and then the question is, what has been done, if anything, for the rehabilitation of the child to be reintegrated with the school population? I think that there's a very significant matter that we need to consider. When the child is suspended, the question that needs to be answered, is it that the parents at that stage is under any obligation, legal obligation, to participate in any processes at that stage? So there's something that is a question that I myself is posing as to whether in fact the parents is under any obligation after the child is suspended. So what I would like to see is that do not just have a suspension. If we are going to be looking at the ensuring that the children and the parents are binded to embark on, let's say, for example, counseling. Let's say, for example, maybe parent sessions, if it's an issue where the parent is falling short. It's important for us to use the procedures that are available under the law to invoke the courts. No one to impose a child, but you want to be able to have the courts make the necessary orders so that the child and the parent can be binded. So there's obligations to ensure that there's rehabilitation of the child for reintegration. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, fine. Chalo, have you been able to raise the piece of music yet?
Yeah, I have it actually.
All right, let's go with it.
My people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways. Then I shall hear from heaven, and will forgive their sin, and will heal their land.
Gadaya, you cry, Gadaya, Daya, Gadaya, because they're coming on the nation. Everybody frightened, they're running for cover. No respect of persons, them bandit, them killer. They're raping and looting, they're killing you dead. Nobody escaping. Booyaka, bullet in your head. Oh my country, overnight, get so angry, on uptight. I search out the answer, and this is what I discover. Or you push the creator out, you didn't want the name in your mouth. So you take him out of the school curriculum, no knowledge of God for your children. Look around you, all you have is teenage bandits. They might have nothing in it but oath and AIDS and CXC, but no knowledge of the Almighty. Just because you push the Creator out, you didn't want the name in your mouth. So you take him out of the school curriculum, you're reaping the fruits of your actions.
All right, so I'll give you the rest of it before we go.
All right, Martin Lumpkin, the ball is in your court from somebody much more articulate and better able to pose the question than I am. Spirituality, religion in schools have gone out of the door in the government schools. And somebody will make the argument that the religious schools do a better job of discipline than the government schools. Is there any validity in that argument?
That perception can be argued either way. We want to say generally that the schools should give an holistic approach to education. So when we look at the curriculum, we should look at the areas of the subject bases as well as the other related and hidden curriculum as well too. Hidden curriculum as it relates to behaviors and how the persons relate to others, etc., etc. And spirituality and as well religion, because we can argue it could be two separate entities. But spirituality does play a part, and for the most part in Trinidad and Tobago, as part of our culture, we have grown up being spiritual as well as religious persons. And I don't think that, and this is a personal view, there isn't a tutor's stance as such, but in my personal and humble view, the spiritual growth of a child is also important, because all religions and all spiritualities, I think they are common grounds of areas that are beneficial to an individual. Within the school, we are supposed to look at all aspects and even touching religious tolerance as well too. That should be part of it as well, because we don't want instances where persons are of a certain sect and they believe that they are the best, and they are only promoting, and they will also promote violence or intolerance of that. So in terms of a holistic view, I believe that it does have a part to play in the education system, and children should be exposed to not only their particular religion or spirituality, but others, in order to have an appreciation of all.
So, Charles, you're a parent. So let's hear your voice on not only this matter, but on difficult matters associated with children and discipline, and what is happening in schools.
How would I sum it up as a parent myself? I mean, like, I have two children in school right now. One at Tranquility, one, who is at UTT, and I have three other children before that, and they have all gone through the system, going to the various levels of school. I've never really had a problem with either one of them in having to go into school because they are misbehaving or they are talking back to teachers and things like that.
And why do you think that is so, Charles?
Well,
why do you think is it discipline in the home? Whatever.
I think it's probably discipline in the home, but then again, not all of them grew up here with me either, But how we speak to them, how we talk with them, how we put different things inside of them. The foundation is very, very important, and if parents put down that strong foundation, and that foundation didn't come by licks every day and all that sort of thing, but by talking with them, by showing them different scenarios, and yes, being stern with them, not giving them too much leeway to do what they want. And they have gone through the school system, even in schools where there was fights taking place, and never really had to get involved in those things either. or want to be part of the group, want to be part of the gang, or want to be part of the in crowd, and they traverse through the system and without much problems at all.
Yeah. So if I hear you correctly, you're saying parenting, quality parenting, is part of keeping the child, the student, on a straight and narrow path, to use some biblical language there. Yes?
Yes, and being there with them, listening to them also, and always looking to recognize when changes are taking place within them also. So if you find that they are in a particular mode, or you try to find out what's going on, and you try to keep on top of things, and and even if there might be a problem in school, you try to see how best you can intervene before it develops into something that could be really catastrophic.
Yeah. Sergeant Ali, Rashoti is saying that, in addition, and somewhere in the lyrics, he talks about not only maths and English and geography and so on, but there has to be some consideration for the subjects which talk about building a quality person.
Tony, that's very, very important. It's very critical. And what bothers me when I look at the Education Act, it seems to indicate the overall development of the child. But when you look at the process, you look at the education system, one needs to ask whether, in fact, it is actually promoting that overriding objective. So that is, I'd like to put that immediately on the table. I think it's important. Could you imagine that a Tony Fraser or a Martin Lumpkin, who is persons who are known in the public domain, where are the avenues for the proper intervention so that the role models can speak, share their experiences? And I'm just using Tony Fraser and Mr. Lumpkin. There are many other role models in Trinidad and Tobago in different contexts. And, to be fair, I saw in the matrix that we spoke about a while ago, I saw where there is the opportunity for that sort of engagement. The question is, are we really exploring that avenue to have integrated in our education system the persons who would have achieved some success, wherever it may be, whether it be agriculture, whether it's an artist, whether it's a national sporting icon, where is the avenue for those persons to be consistently getting back into the system to share their experiences to achieve that overall development? So I think it's a very, very important. And, just to go back to that, it's just spirituality. I remember, not too long ago, we have what they call the religious instructions or the religious education. And I think that is a very critical subject, and is a critical subject for one, clearly, and Mr. Lumpkin indicated, for the purposes of knowing each other and understanding each other in a cosmopolitan society. But more importantly, if you are having religious instructions and religious education where you have the various faiths set up, where the church and the mosque and the mandir are now incorporated into the education system for an hour or 45 minutes weekly, what you will have is that you have consistent reminders given to the children as to how they should live, not only from a secular context, but from a religious context. So even within a school system, that they are being reminded as to what are the directives of the higher being. So I think that, we need to revisit, in my respectful view, those religious instructions and religious education. But most importantly, that point in terms of Rash, more than academic, it is about being able to communicate and socialize and exist in a society where we have different creed and race. So I think extremely important, and I cannot add or promote the emphasis of overall development of a child.
Okay. So we are talking about violence in schools. We are talking about students who are obviously lacking in all kinds of ways. We heard Rashoti talking about the spiritual elements of it, and other elements we talked about all afternoon here. We are talking with Martin Lumpkin, who is the president of Tutor, and Sergeant Zaheer Ali, who is police officer, parent, and attorney at law. Gentlemen, how do we wind up this discussion by giving some ideas as some of the critical things which have to be done. Let me start the sergeant on that. What are some of the things that need to be done all around? The Ministry of Education, the schools, the supervisory unit, etc., and of course parents.
Well, where I would like to start, and thank you very much for this opportunity, in going forward with the recommendations. I think that um, there need to be discussions at a very, very senior level, at a national level, looking at it, in a big way, so that we are looking at perhaps a national task force with the necessary stakeholders to really brainstorm and see exactly how can we respond, how should we respond, what is required to respond to this issue of school violence. So you have all these stakeholders coming around a table. Now, I'm very careful with this as well. I'm not asking them to come around a table respectfully for a talk shop. I'm asking for a swift thinking, swift reasoning, and effective implementation of whatever strategy by the stakeholders. So that's number one. Number two, I think that we need to embark on an educational drive with reference to having both parents and teachers in particular understand their role and functions under the Children's Act, so that if you are on your legislative responsibilities, for example, if under Section 27 of the Education Act speak about principals having the responsibility for the safety and security of the school, then they will appreciate that you don't need someone to tell you that if there's an act of serious violence, that you report it. Or if you are seeing the propensity for violence, that you do not take proactive steps to be able to prevent and be able to have some resolution to that matter. So, secondly, I'll talk about an educational drive, emphasizing among the teachers, as I said before, and the parents about their role and responsibilities. And I must, again, acknowledge Mr. Lumpkin in terms of the discussions that already started. And finally, in terms of a 3-point plan, I think it's important from a law enforcement context that law enforcement really recognize now the importance of meaningful intervention to ensure that we lend that support to the education system and to a certain extent the parents who may be unable to control a child. I think that it's important for law enforcement to make that impact, meaningful impact. So law enforcement impact, educational campaign to emphasize the role and functions of parents and teachers. And the first limb was the establishment of a national task force to be able to look at this in a surgical way, but swiftly with effective and expeditious implementation.
Let me ask Mr. Lumpkin, President of the Teachers Association, to get involved in terms of identifying a path to go forward with.
We have to look at short-term, medium-term, and long-term interventions. One of the first things is admittance that there is a wider problem in society, and one not throw our hands up in the air and give up hope. We must always have hope. Sergeant Ali spoke of a number of areas which we agree with. So the interventions must be in terms of short-term and wider and long-term. We have to look at not only the symptoms, but the causes or the root causes of violence and indiscipline and crime and criminality in Trinidad and Tobago, and be bold enough and brave enough to tackle what is taking place, because again, emphasizing the school is a microcosm of society, and if we don't seriously look at dealing with these areas of crime and criminality, we'll be just spinning top and mud. But in terms of short term, the Ministry of Education has its role within the school system. The government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago has to look at it in a multi-pronged approach and societal approach as well. Some of the areas that we believe can make a difference is peer mediation. One of the areas we feel, so that where peer pressure is real, but if we have persons of the students' likeness, having that mediation and counseling as well too. So we can identify students who have that propensity to do that and look at that as well too. The area of student support services division, there needs to be greater emphasis, greater resources for them as well too, which will assist the schools as well. The cooperation of the other governmental agencies, the continued support of the TTPS, because I must say there are a number of very hardworking members of the TTPS. I have had interaction, and I can say my interaction with them has been very positive. They respond in a like manner as well too. There are some bad ones, just like any teaching service, but generally the cooperation of the TTPS in not only law enforcement, but in terms of rehabilitation as well too, because the majority of our students look up to law enforcement officers, and if they can do some level of counseling, not in terms of hard counseling, but soft counseling as well too, soft interventions as well, that can work in terms of that. But in terms of violence and discipline as well too, the wider society, I am also glad, as Sergeant Ali spoke about, the incoming Commissioner of Police speaking of tackling gangs as well too. We look forward to that because it is influencing some of our school children, and so we look forward to that short, medium, and long-term interventions.
I'm sorry for bringing this thing so late in the discussion, but the sort of curriculum change, that is more a curriculum that is more relevant and therefore could encourage and bring students into the learning process must surely be something that has to be done.
Of course, and I'm sure you can appreciate, Tony, that our curriculum school system is still colonial by nature, and we have to get out of that colonial system of education, and really let's ask the hard questions and not just be a talk shop, but be willing to have that effective change. And you're quite right, curriculum has to be relevant to our society today and to national development as well.
Martin Lumpkin, President of Tutor, and Sergeant Zaheer Ali, who is a police officer, obviously, an attorney at law, and of course a parent. Thank you very much. It's a discussion which has just started really, and which at this point, I'm not trying to say that we invented such a discussion. I'm just saying that in this series of programs, it's clearly there's a long road ahead for us to get out of the difficult situations that we are involved in. Sir Charles, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you very much for your guest passing through. It's nice to have you people here on New Era TT Radio.
Sir Charles, before you go off, can you inform as to when the program is going to be rerun?
Oh, yes. So the program will be rerun on New Era TT radio.com. You can get it there tomorrow morning from around 8:20 a.m.
Wonderful.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon, people.
See you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
No problem.
So you're taking out of the school curriculum the knowledge of God for your children. Look around you, all you have is teenage bandits. They might have nothing in it but O's and A's and CXC, but no knowledge of the Almighty. Just because you push the Creator out, you didn't want the name in your mouth. So you take him out of the school curriculum, you're reaping the fruits of your actions. So tell me where you're balling for, where all you crying for, where you're balling for, where all you crying for is you who pushed the Creator out. You didn't want the name in your mouth. Don't condemn the children for their iniquity, because it's all you who made them and shape their mentality. What you did in secret, you're doing openly. Don't run away from it, it's your own cruelty. A mango can't bear a fig, a donkey can't make a pig. You sow seeds of darkness, now you're reaping wickedness. Just because you push the creator out, you didn't want him in your mouth, so you take him out of the school curriculum. No knowledge of God for your children.